Let's see the cradle song. No music. It's too muted in here. Well, I was just. One, two, three. Oh, maybe that's too quick. Yeah. We have like 6 minutes. We don't have to do them. You want to do some Beethoven? We just do the first one that like too fast. We can get it later. It is, yeah. Okay, let's do for ball number 3. Yeah. Okay.
your seats. We'll be beginning in about 2 minutes. Please take your seat. Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you to ARIA musicians for welcoming us with such beautiful music. My name is Helen Turner, and I'm honored to serve as the Director of Education for the St. Louis Catherine Feldman Holocaust Museum. Thank you for joining us on this day of solemn remembrance. Before we begin, a few notes. We are grateful to Deaf Inc. for providing interpretation today, helping make this program more accessible for all. The lyrics and transliterations for today's songs and prayers were placed on your chairs. We invite you to follow along and, if you feel moved, to lend your voice to these powerful expressions of memory and resilience. And finally, in respect for the memories we carry and the stories we honor, we ask that you refrain from any applause during today's program, and ask that you silence your phones to maintain the sanctity of this event. Thank you. Today we gather to observe Yom HaShoah, the Day of Remembrance. The full name, Yom HaShoah Vihi Gevurah, means the Day of Remembrance of the Holocaust and the heroism. It falls on the 27th day of the Hebrew month of Nisan, which this year was on April 24th. Across the globe, people are gathering in moments like this, moments of grief and reverence, to remember not only the 6 million Jews who were murdered, but also the acts of resistance and the unbreakable spirit of those who endured. This year marks 80 years since the liberation and the end of the Holocaust. 80 years of memory, of ritual, of returning again and again to this sacred obligation to remember. This anniversary compels us to pause, to step away from the noise and the pace of our lives, to sit together in community, to grieve, to remember, to bear witness, and to recommit ourselves to the promise of never again. To those survivors and their descendants who are with us here today, we are honored by your presence. Thank you so much for being here. And to those survivors who have passed on this year, May their memories be a true blessing for us all. We now begin our commemoration with the Holocaust Torah procession. Several Torah scrolls, sacred texts that survived the flames of the Shoah, found their way here, into the care of our St. Louis Jewish community. Today they are carried by local rabbis, clergy, and descendants of survivors. Symbols of resistance, of enduring faith, they are part of an unbroken chain of tradition. Receiving the Torahs are Dr. Matt Berman and Kent Hirschfelder, both members of the Yom HaShoah Committee and descendants of survivors. At this time, please turn your attention to the aisle, and if you are able, please rise for the Holocaust Torah procession. Before the procession, Roy Hendon will blow the shofar, its ancient call echoing through time, a cry of memory, of mourning, and of resilience. Thank you all. Please be seated. Thank you all for that powerful symbol of remembrance and resistance. Carrying the Torah for Temple Israel was Rabbi Alper. Carrying the Torah for Temple Emmanuel was Rabbi Schloss. Carrying the Torah for United Hebrew was Cantor Richmond. Carrying the Torah for B'nai Amunah was Rabbi Scoff. Carrying the Torah for Kolrina was Simon and Ben Ingelnick. Carrying the Torah for Central Reform Congregation was Rabbi Fleischer. And carrying the Torah for Sheremeth was Rabbi Goldstein. Next, we'll be joined by Rabbi Michael Alper of Temple Israel for some opening remarks.
It is a privilege to welcome you all to Congregation Temple Israel. It is an honor to open our doors to you as sacred guests in this holy space, as we recall those whose lives were brutally taken and those survivors whose lives were forever changed by the Shoah. It is a comfort to gather with you at this time of great difficulty and upheaval. At this moment, there are those who would deny the truths of the Holocaust. At this moment, there are those who call for the destruction of the Jewish homeland. In the streets of New York and St. Louis, in the soccer stadiums of Europe, voices rise in hateful unity, calling again for an end to our people. It is now more important than ever to demand that the stories of all who were silenced are again given voice. May we amplify their stories. May we share their memories. May we renew our commitment to our faith and to our people in the days that lie ahead. May the memories of all who perished forever remain a blessing.
Thank you, Rabbi Alper. Good afternoon. My name is Myron Friedman, director of the St. Louis Kaplan Feldman Holocaust Museum, and I am honored to be with you today. We are grateful to see so many members of the community in attendance. To our survivors, descendants, Yom HaShoah Committee, board members, museum members, volunteers, and friends, thank you for being with us. Your presence reflects the strength of this community and the continued urgency of our mission. As has been mentioned, this year we mark 80 years since the end of the Holocaust, the passage of time that brings with it a responsibility to honor those who survived and to remember those who did not. But it also brings us to a new phase, one where we must decide how the memory of the Holocaust is carried forward, and who carries it, and how it continues to shape our response to hate in our own time. This year's theme, Liberation, Loss, and Life, reminds us that liberation was not an ending, but it was a beginning. The end of the war did not erase the trauma or bring back those murdered by hate. Survivors faced a world of devastation, of displacement, and grief. But many rebuilt. They forged new lives. They raised families, opened businesses, and shared stories that now anchor our collective purpose. And yet, today, we again see warning signs. Anti-Semitism is not a relic of the past. It lives on, it mutates, it threatens. By joining us at this program, you are participating in an act that makes memory visible. Our role as a community is to give that memory power. Through your presence here today, you make clear this history matters, and it must never be forgotten. So I invite you to carry the remembrance into the world with you, into your classrooms, your dinner tables, your communities. Let the stories of those we honor tonight not only teach us about what was lost, but about the courage it takes to rebuild, to speak out, and to live with purpose. So again, Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Myron. My name is Greg Yowitz, and I am honored to serve as the board chair of the St. Louis Kaplan Feldman Holocaust Museum. This afternoon, we gather not only in remembrance, but in reflection on what it means to be part of a community entrusted with carrying this legacy forward. For decades, the Yom HaShoah commemoration has been one of the most sacred responsibilities of our community. Thank you to Congregation Temple Israel for being this year's host. And I'd like to echo Myron's gratitude to the Yom HaShoah Committee. Because of you, this program is a success year after year. We often speak about honoring the memory of those we lost, and we will continue to do so. But we also have a duty to uphold the honor and the responsibility of the living, to stand against anti-Semitism, to speak out against hatred, and to ensure that the next generation understands both the fragility of freedom and the strength of those who survived. At the museum, we take this responsibility seriously. Together, we're not just preserving history, we're shaping the conversations. We're educating our community and people of all ages. We're inviting the public to engage with the hard truths. We're showing what it looks like when a community refuses to be silent. To our survivors and their families, we carry your stories with reverence and pride. To our partners and supporters, thank you for standing beside us. And to everyone here today, thank you for helping to ensure that the lessons of the Holocaust remain part of our shared moral compass, not just today, but every day. Next, Dee Dee Simon, the chair of the Missouri Holocaust Education and Awareness Commission, will join us for remarks.
Thank you, Greg. Good afternoon. On this Yom HaShoah, we pause to remember the 6 million Jews who were murdered in the Holocaust, along with the millions of others whose lives were also taken. Each was a person with a name, a story, and a future stolen. Entire ways of life erased. A loss that is truly hard to comprehend. Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. Memory is powerful, and today we carry those memories with us, not just to mourn, but to honor, to bear witness, and to say clearly and firmly, never again is now. For the survivors, the weight of that loss did not end with liberation. It followed them in their footsteps, in their dreams, and the quiet moments no one else could see. It shaped them in sorrow, yes, but also in an incredible strength. It lingered in memory, in silence, and sometimes in the things that were too painful to put into words. And so today we celebrate the survivors, their courage, their strength, their refusal to let darkness define them. In the face of unimaginable loss, they chose life. They rebuilt, they loved, and they even found laughter. Their resilience is a powerful reminder that even after the deepest loss, there remains a space, a sacred space, for something new to grow. Not to replace what was lost, but to carry it forward, to build meaning from memory, and to let light break through, even after the darkest night. As the Missouri Holocaust Education and Awareness Commission works to support and educate teachers across the state charged with the responsibility of teaching this complex and painful history, we place survivor testimony at the heart of our lessons. When we hear a survivor speak, we aren't just listening to a story. We are being trusted with truth. We are being given something sacred, the lived memory of a person who endured what most of us can hardly imagine. And with this memory comes responsibility to listen with our whole hearts, to hold their words with care, to understand that as survivors grow fewer in number, we become the next witness. It becomes our task to carry their stories forward, not just by remembering facts, but by remembering the humanity behind them, by sharing what we heard, what we felt, and why it matters. So when we hear a survivor's story, our job is not just to feel moved in the moment, but to stay moved, to let their courage stir our own. That's what it means to bear witness, not just to remember, but to act. Thank you.
Thank you, Dee Dee. This year, we are honored to be joined by Erica Schwartz, our Yom HaShoah survivor speaker. Erica was born in Hungary in 1944 and survived the Holocaust as a very young child. We are grateful to listen to her testimony today. After Erica's remarks, Rabbi Amy Feder will lead us in the partisan song, a song of resistance accompanied by the aria musicians. Thank you, Erica, for your courage and for sharing your testimony with us today.
Is my microphone on? Can you hear me? Just a couple of things I want to say. First of all, I apologize. I have to read this. I've been telling my family's story for years, and I can't get through it without reading it. Also, my story goes beyond the Holocaust. For some survivors, the Shoah did not end in 1945. And for my mother, it never ended. So I'm also going to talk about how that affected me. My story begins in a Nazi ghetto in 1944 Hungary. I was marked for death from the moment of my birth. Today, I'm living the happiest years of my life, and that's a very important part of my story. So bear with me when I begin to tell you about my post-war life. I was born Erika Hornstein on April 23, 1944, in the Nyíregyháza, Hungary ghetto. 2 weeks later, all of the women and children in my family were transported to Auschwitz to be murdered. That defines me as a Holocaust survivor, and that was how I lived my life for 44 years. Much of those years were ruled by my role as the child of a survivor. My mother was totally destroyed by the war. She lost her entire family. She was born in the town of HaShoah. Until her mid-teens, my mother lived surrounded by grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins. The entire family lived within walking distance of each other. Her parents were Honey Wertheimer and David Petrover. She had 2 sisters, Margit and Olga. She also had 2 brothers, Avram and Yena. In 1938, when my mother was just 16 years old, the Hungarian government passed laws restricting Jewish participation in day-to-day life. Jews were forbidden to participate in most professions. Jewish children weren't allowed to attend public schools. Jews were forced to abandon their homes. My mother's family was forced from their home in HaShoah and moved to the city of Nyíregyháza. By late 1943, my grandfather's sister Rose began to bombard my grandfather with letters, begging him to get the family out of Europe. She lived in New York and had already begun the process of getting everyone to safety. His response was no. He believed the family was safe and that the war would be over long before the Nazis turned their attention to Hungary. My parents had been living in Budapest, and by that time, my father had already been drafted into a forced labor camp. My mother was alone and frightened. At first, wives were permitted to visit their husbands, and in the fall of 1943, my mother learned that she was pregnant. She was no longer permitted to visit my father, so she left their Budapest apartment and moved in with her parents in Nyíregyháza. On March 19, 1944, Nazis occupied the town. By April 17th, they completed the construction of the ghetto. A wall topped with barbed wire encircled the entire Jewish neighborhood. Jews from all the surrounding towns were herded into the ghetto. On April 24th, the ghetto was sealed. I was 1 day old. My grandparents' home was within the boundaries of the ghetto. All of my mother's female relatives and their children were moved into the house. But there were only 123 houses for over 17,000 Jews. I can well imagine how many others were in that house. Within a couple of days, my grandfather was dragged from the home and was never seen again. Family members in the house included my grandmother, my great-grandmother Dina, 2 aunts, and there were also 4 children, me and 3 little cousins, 9-year-old Mickey, 7-year-old Imre, and 2.5-year-old Zhuzhi. When word reached my father that my mother had given birth, he somehow managed to escape from the labor camp and headed straight to Nyíregyháza. The Nazis required that all Jews be imprisoned in a ghetto closest to their official address. My father had papers with the address of their Budapest apartment. The Jews in Budapest had not yet been rounded up, and he knew that he could buy time if he could get us there. I was just a few days old when he arrived. He immediately went to the office of the authorities, which in Hungary was the Arrow Cross, a segment of the Hungarian military that was more than happy to help the Nazis. My father presented the papers showing that my mother and I should officially be in Budapest. The details of how he managed to get permission to take us to Budapest were never clear to me. All I know from what my mother told me is that he received the required pass when I was just a little over a week old. Knowing that as an escapee he was being hunted and afraid to be with us in case he was discovered with us, my father returned to the labor camp immediately after getting us to Budapest. He was murdered on March 8, 1945, just 2 months before the Allies liberated the camps. My mother's 19-year-old sister Olga somehow was able to slip out of the ghetto when my father got my mother and me out, and she also headed straight to Budapest. When they reached the city, my mother and Olga were able to obtain Christian identity papers, get an apartment, and they lived quietly for 2 months as 2 Christian women. In early May, everyone who remained in my grandparents' home were transported by cattle car to Auschwitz. My mother's older sister Margit and sister-in-law Clara were the only ones who survived the initial selections. Jewish prisoners who were forced to help unload the cattle cars tried to convince the young mothers to hand their children over to elderly people. They knew that if these mothers reached the front of the selection line holding their children, they would be sent with the children to the gas chamber. Margit and Clara handed the 3 children to my grandmother, and I can't imagine what her last moments must have been like in the gas chamber with her 3 little grandchildren. In Budapest, my mother and her teenage sister Olga were living in relative safety. My mother stayed in the apartment with me, while Olga occasionally went out for food. On July 5th, 1944, Olga left the apartment. Just as she stepped out of the building, a former neighbor recognized her and yelled, "She's a Jew." Nearby Arrow Cross soldiers immediately ran in her direction. Olga turned and ran back into the building with the soldiers close behind. She must have realized that she had very few options, or none at all, that wouldn't lead the soldiers directly to my mother and me hiding in the apartment. So she made a fateful decision. My teenage aunt raced to the roof of the building and jumped. She died on a Budapest sidewalk on July 5th, 1944. My mother and I were never discovered. My mother immediately left the apartment, went into hiding, and was never willing to tell me anything more about how we survived. It wasn't until after the war that my mother learned how her older sister Margit died. Clara, her sister-in-law, survived and was with Margit on the day that she was murdered. Margit survived until the very end, working in the kitchens of Auschwitz. On the day of liberation, on the very day that the Allies entered Auschwitz to liberate the prisoners, many of the remaining Nazis were so intent on killing Jews that instead of fleeing from the Allies, they stayed to randomly shoot and kill as many Jews as they could. My Aunt Margit was killed on the day of liberation. So that's the story of the murder of my father and of my mother's entire family. However, that's not the end of my story. As a result of the brutal murder of her entire family and all that she had witnessed, my mother suffered from severe post-traumatic stress disorder. But PTSD wasn't recognized until after the Vietnam War, and by that time, it was far too late to protect me and later my two younger brothers. The damage that her emotional collapse inflicted on us was profound. My childhood was hell. She was my only parent, my only adult family member. I know she loved me because of all that she did for me, but she destroyed my childhood because of all that she did to me. By the time I began to understand the implications of her experiences and how they affected me, I had already spent years repeating her self-destructive behavior. And as a result, I inflicted a lot of emotional damage on my own kids. Sometime after the war ended, my mother's Aunt Rose discovered that we had survived. We were living in Budapest. In the chaos of post-war Europe, no one knew who was dead or alive. My mother believed that anyone looking for her would be looking in Budapest. Aunt Rose began the process of getting us to the United States and urged my mother to leave Hungary as soon as possible. She refused. It took her over 2 years to accept the fact that she and I were the only survivors, and she finally agreed to leave Hungary. But by this time, everything had changed. Hungary was now a communist country, and it was almost impossible to get out. Aunt Rose arranged for a distant cousin, who was a United States citizen, to fly to Hungary, marry my mother, and take her to the United States. There was just one catch. She couldn't leave with me. She would have to temporarily leave me behind with a couple she had known for just a short time. She finally made the agonizing decision and agreed to Aunt Rose's plan. My mother's new marriage was only supposed to facilitate getting us out of Hungary, but somehow the distant cousin convinced her that they should stay married. She agreed, and that turned out to be a huge mistake. In less than 2 years, he became very violent. I remember coming home from kindergarten and finding my mother lying beaten on the living room floor. Shortly after that, we escaped, literally, in a desperate run one afternoon just before he came home from work. And that was the beginning of many frightening incidents that defined my life well into my 40s. Some of the chaos was due to the emotional damage that my mother suffered, and some of it was self-inflicted chaos due to the emotional damage that I had suffered. Our escape also marked the beginning of my journey through 9 different elementary schools, and that had a huge impact on my life. I was always the new kid on the block, and I had a difficult time making friends. When I was 7, she married my stepfather. By the time I was 10, I had 2 new brothers. But her relationship with my stepfather was not good. He never treated me like a daughter, and I had a ton of emotional baggage. Not knowing how long I'd live in any one neighborhood, I wanted to make friends quickly, so I developed the habit of lying to try to make myself stand out quickly. That backfired many times and only made things worse. Life at home was filled with hysteria and violence, and I hated being home. I married at the age of 19, and we moved far away from home. But having divorced my stepfather by then, my mother quickly followed. She lived near us until the end of her life. She needed me, and I did all I could for her. Sadly, she was never able to give me what I needed from her. And she was never able to validate me as a daughter of whom she was proud. My self-image was terrible. My life was a disaster for years, some of it of my own making, and some of it was just happenstance. I couldn't have children, so my husband and I adopted 2 baby boys. Our oldest son, David, was born to a mother who was on drugs and alcohol throughout her pregnancy, and as a result, he suffered from severe ADHD throughout his life. Our second son, born on the Navajo reservation, was in a foster home for 3 months, and during that entire time, he was barely held and never cuddled, and he suffered from failure to bond syndrome. He became a lifelong alcoholic, and we lost him to liver failure in 2023. However, he is the father of our only grandchild, born when our son was just 17 years old. His looming teenage fatherhood felt like a nightmare at the time, but his baby daughter turned out to be the greatest blessing in my entire life, and I will gladly tell you about that in a moment. Until I was 44, my life was one nightmare after another. Then, one fateful day, I heard someone say these words: "You may not have control over anything that's happening around you, but you have complete control over everything that happens between your 2 ears." Those were simple words, but something miraculous happened to me at that moment. For the first time in my life, I thought that perhaps my happiness or lack of happiness just might be a choice. Maybe I could find joy in my day. It was always very easy to see only the bad. Or maybe I could seek what was good. Did I even have the capacity to be happy? I was drowning in depression, and I knew that my life depended on finding a different path. I started writing a gratitude list every day. I took long walks, and I literally smelled the flowers in just about every yard I passed. I must have looked pretty goofy to my neighbors, but it was beginning to work. I stopped myself from screaming in rage every time something didn't meet my expectations. If necessary, I stopped myself mid-sentence. I literally hated everyone in my family, and I knew I had to find a way to turn that around. There were people in my life that I wanted to love, so that became another daily list, reminding myself to seek out every good thing about my family every day. I had been programmed by nurture to see only what was bad in my life, but I was astonished to realize I had the capacity to see what was good. I just had to learn how to tap into it. It took several years for me to overwrite the program in my head, and I clearly remember the day that I realized I was no longer working at it. Today, I cherish all that I have rather than focus on what I don't have. And my greatest gift was given to me by the son I lost. He was just 17 and heavily into drugs and alcohol when his daughter Kim was born. Her mother could have easily kept us out of their lives, but she didn't. Kim's mom became like a daughter to us, and as a result, Kim was the center of our lives. We all lived in Southern California. Kim married a wonderful guy, and they eventually had 3 sons. I was happier than I'd ever been in my entire life. But 8 years ago, they moved from California to Springfield, Missouri. One more time, my world fell apart, but here I am. My husband and I live in Springfield. Kim is here with me today because this morning, tears of happiness are good tears. This morning, she drove me here to speak to you. Kim and her family live just 5 minutes from us, and she drives me to every speaking engagement that's more than an hour drive from my house. Her amazing husband, Josh, will be accompanying me to Jackson Hole, Wyoming next month for a 4-day speaking engagement. Bill and I have rotating play dates every week with our 3 great-grandsons. These wonderful twilight years of my life are happier than I can even describe. And I owe it all to those magic words that I heard so many years ago. Those words opened the door to a complete change in how I saw myself and the world around me. So I love to end with one last reminder. You may not have control over anything that's happening around you, but you do have control over everything that happens between your 2 ears. Thank you.
Zorg niet keinmal als du gehst im letzten Weg, wenn Himmeln bleien verstehen neue Tee. Kommen wird noch unser ausgebänkten Show, Sveter beugt und unser Trott mit seinen Do. Kommen wird noch unser ausgebänkten Show, Sveter beugt und unser Trott mit seinen Do. Von Grimmen, Pammeland bis Weitenland von Schnee, wir kommen on mit unser Pein und unser Weh. Wo gefallen sitze Spritz von unser Blut, Sprotzen weht durch unser Gwore, unser Mut. Wo gefallen sitze Spritz von unser Blut, Sprotzen weht durch unser Gwore, unser Mut.
Thank you, Rabbi Amy and the aria musicians, for that powerful performance of the partisan song. My heartfelt gratitude to Erica for sharing her testimony with us here today. You inspire all of us with your prose and your courage. Next, it is my honor to introduce this year's descendant speaker, Sophia Kent. Sophia has been deeply involved in our community and in the HaShoah committee for many years. She is also an active member and former co-chair of our Survivor and Descendants group. She regularly shares her family's testimony with school groups at the museum, and we are so grateful to have her here with us today. Sophia, please join us.
So my story is really my parents' story. Children of survivors are affected by their parents' experiences, much like everyone. Some in subtle ways and some not so subtle or easy to understand. It took me a very long time to talk about this, and it is not easy. I have chosen to share this story and my difficult life with you in the hope that younger generations will learn the lessons of the past and hopefully make this world a better place. My mother's parents and my father's parents were born in Benjamin, Poland. On the eve of World War II, the Benjamin Jewish community was 28,000 and more than half of the total population. My mother was one of 4 children. She was the only one who survived. My father was one of 9 children. 4 survived. My mother, Dora, was born 1915. At the age of 13, she went to work to help her family financially. My father, Marek, was born in 1900 and lived a more prosperous, carefree life. In September of 1939, the German army invaded Poland. The Nazis overran Benjamin, murdering Jewish inhabitants, burning the Great Benjamin Synagogue, and creating the Benjamin Ghetto in 1940. My mother was able to leave the ghetto and go to work, wearing the yellow Jewish star on her clothes. I was never told how my parents met. They married in 1940. My mother was 25, and my father was 40 years old. During those difficult times, people did not want to be alone, and I'm very grateful that they found each other. Otherwise, I would not have been born. By the summer of 1943, everyone in the ghetto were deported to Auschwitz-Birkenau. My parents were lucky. They were told by someone not to get on the trains, which were cattle cars that transported people to Auschwitz, but to ride in trucks. This is how they landed in the forced labor camps and not in the gas chambers of Auschwitz. My mother's parents refused to leave in the roundup and hid under the floorboards of the apartment. They were never heard of again. My parents were lucky that they were both sent to Monowitz-Buna, also called Auschwitz III, from August 1943 to April 1944. They worked as slave labor at a chemical factory, IG Farbenwerke, where they produced war ammunition and gases for the gas chambers of Birkenau. My mother worked at the ammunition factory. My father was forced to dig ditches and was severely beaten and mistreated. The last camp they were both sent to was Großrosen from April 1944 until they were liberated by the Russians on May 5, 1945. If the war had gone any longer, my father would have died from starvation and exhaustion. After liberation, my parents found their way to Waldenburg, Poland, where I was born in 1946. My father started a small business, but because of the many pogroms against the Jews, when I was 6 months old, we escaped out of Poland with the help of some very important people. It was a very frightening time for them. They made it to a displaced person camp outside of Vienna, Austria. We were then sent to a DP camp in Felderfing, Germany, outside of Munich. My father started a small business in Munich. Later, he had an opportunity to buy a business in Worms, Germany. My mother was very worried because there were no other Jewish people there. My mother was always very concerned about protecting me and educating me. So she sent me to a school in Frankfurt, which was Institut Français. It meant that I had to stay with another family during the week. I was 11 years old, and my mother told me not to tell anybody I was Jewish. In the 1950s, I was sent to a children's home in Bad Nauheim, Germany. I was very unhappy there. My mother instilled in me to always stay on guard and be private. Even today, it is difficult for me to speak about my growing up years. I ended up going to 9 different schools, and ironically, I graduated from high school in Worms, Germany, where we lived, but I was the only Jewish student. My parents rarely spoke of the war or what they experienced. Once I was 15 years old, we were in a synagogue for Yom Kippur, and my father became very agitated. When the service ended, my father went up to a man and started hitting him on the back and yelling at him, "How can you come here and pray with us when you have done what you have done?" The man had been a couple who had kicked and abused my father in one of the camps. We tried to emigrate excuse me, to the United States, but were denied due to some spots on my father's lungs, which they feared was tuberculosis. Excuse me one second. I went to college to become a medical technologist. While still in Germany, I met and married an American soldier, which sped up my coming to America. I was 21 years old when I came to the United States. My mother came to live with us here in the United States by my father's state in Germany. There was a lot missing in my childhood, and that is very true for many children of Holocaust survivors. My parents had suffered so much in the Holocaust. No one recognized PTSD then. If I could speak with them today, I would ask so many questions. The defining issue of my life is the Holocaust. Even though I was born after it ended, children of survivors still feel the pain of something they never missed themselves.
Thank you, Sophia, for your powerful testimony. My name is Cynthia Wachtel, and I am the manager of Israel Emissary Initiatives and oversee a Shinshinim program at the Jewish Federation. A Shinshin is an 18-year-old Israeli emissary who has graduated from high school and defers their army service in the IDF for 1 year. They volunteer in Jewish communities abroad with the goal of educating people of all ages about Israel and Israeli culture. The Shinshinim serve as Israeli cultural ambassadors throughout the community, and the program ultimately builds a bridge between Israeli youth and Jewish communities, creating an educational dialogue between the two in order to strengthen our Jewish family ties and to build the foundation for a secure Jewish future. The Shinshinim program is a partnership between the Jewish Agency for Israel, the Jewish Federation of St. Louis, and several local partner organizations. Our current Shinshinim are Roni Shoyer, Gaia Zor, and Ziv Shalev. Next, Roni will read a letter written by her great-grandfather, written in 1945, when he was in the Jewish Brigada in Italy. Following Roni, Gaia and Ziv will join us to perform a musical piece, Tears of Angels, by Yoni Rector. Following that musical performance, the Shinshinim and Israeli Scouts will sing the Atikva. Roni, please join us to share your great-grandfather's letter.
I feel the need to share a letter written by my great-grandfather to his oldest daughter, Nira, during his time in Europe as a soldier in the Jewish Brigade. The letter was written in July 1945. Nira, hello to you. As we agreed, you owe me a letter, and I didn't have time to write to you until now. But this time, I don't want to keep track of this. The reason for this is that I won't be there for your 10th birthday celebration. I know very well that my absence will make you very sad. Believe me, Nira, I really wanted to be with you in this special day, but this time, I want to remind you of other times, very sad times, times full of blood, tears from the Jewish diaspora. You may wonder, Nira, why I'm writing such a sad thing to you on your joyful day, your day of celebration. I'll try to explain. We, the Jews of the land of Israel, are happy people because we live free lives in our own country, but because of all the good in our lives here. Sometimes we forget the suffering of the Jews in the diaspora. Therefore, we must always remember the suffering of the Jews in the diaspora, especially during every holiday and celebration, so that we can never forget their pain. And when the day comes and they return to Israel, we, the Jews of the land of Israel, will know how to welcome them and help them in every way we can. So that you, Nira, and all the children will know how to welcome these children. Let me explain. These children were born and grew up during Hitler's evil rule, and they suffered from hunger and maybe never had once enough to eat. There were children who froze in the cold winters without warm clothes. They never knew what it meant to feel joy or smile. They were locked in ghettos and couldn't play fairly. They suffered fear, hatred, and torture, and many of them saw their whole families murdered before their eyes. Only the children who managed to escape the killings survived. These children who carried anger, fear, hatred, and distrust in their hearts will need you to welcome them and teach them how to smile, love, trust, and live free lives. Don't think that'll be easy. It will require a lot of patience, kindness, and love from you, Nira, and from all the children. You must be ready for this important task. Nira, I send many blessings for your birthday, and I will especially bless you with this. When the time comes and you meet the children of the diaspora, may you be a good and loyal friend to them, and may you help them with the love and care, giving them something back for all their suffering. Warm regards to you, Nira. Receive many kisses from me, Abramo.
לעשות, רוצים לבכות והדמעות אינן יורדות, הדמעות אינן יורדות. כי כשהמלאכים בוכים בעולם אחר,
אז בעולם הזה עצוב לנו יותר.
כי כשהמלאכים בוכים בעולם אחר, אז בעולם הזה
עצוב לנו יותר.
עצוב לנו יותר, עצוב לנו יותר.
Thank you. Please be seated. Thank you to the Shinshinaim and the Israeli Scouts. We are delighted to have you join us this year. Your annual presence at this program reminds us that the Holocaust remembrance is something passed down through the generations, allowing us to keep the memory of the victims alive. As this year's theme is liberation, loss, and life, it is imperative that we also honor the thousands of liberators who helped free occupied Europe 80 years ago. Their courage and dedication to documenting the horrors of the Holocaust were crucial to both end the Holocaust and our subsequent remembrance of it. To help us with this remembrance, we welcome Ken Levine, a family friend of liberator Buddy Lebman, of blessed memory. Ken will be sharing a letter written by Buddy. Following his remarks, Rabbi Amy will lead us in the national anthem, accompanied by aria musicians, to honor all of our liberators. Ken, please join us.
Thank you, Edwin. The following testimony is from Liberator Buddy Lebman as he wrote it. My name is Buddy Lebman. I was a corporal in the 445th Heavy Duty Ordnance attached to a tank destroying battalion, which was attached to the 42nd Infantry Division. In the spring of 1945, my company was in southern Germany in the vicinity of Munich. Our unit was advancing steadily. It was apparent that we were getting near something terrible. The stench for miles was very strong and stronger the closer we came. We were not aware what we were approaching, but we knew that it must be hell. The stench for the entire area was so pervasive that it was impossible for the local German people to claim they were unaware, that they knew nothing. They obviously closed their eyes and acted as if nothing was going on. They didn't want to know. But how could they deny what they saw and what they smelled? Impossible. About 20 men from my unit entered the Dachau concentration camp. Our group was the second group to enter Dachau, as others from the 42nd Division had come just 2 hours before us. They left and we came in next. The sights that we saw were those of a nightmare. No movie could capture the horror that surrounded us. There were no German troops present, as they had fled before the 42nd approached the camp. We immediately were shocked in the sights of these human beings they left behind. Naked bodies were piled in carts. Some were strewn on the ground. We saw bodies in the crematorium that had not yet been cremated. There were men in the buildings barely alive on wooden shelves, one on top of the other, 3 or 4 high. Most of them didn't seem like they could survive. The men were standing in small groups outside these buildings, slowly walking around. They looked like cadavers, but they were alive. They didn't seem to be able to recognize that we were there to liberate them. There was almost no smiles or greetings from them. They were beyond that. I don't recall any of them men saying a single word. The scene was reminiscent of Dante's Inferno without the fire. We gave what food we had to them before we were ordered not to, as it could kill them. The sights and the odor were so horrible, I cried and I got sick to my stomach. I threw up several times. I was the only Jewish GI in my company. However, my friends and my buddies also had tears in their eyes. They also threw up. No one could imagine or believe that the human beings could do such atrocious things to other human beings. They said that these sights and smells would haunt them forever, and no one could ever deny the atrocities that they saw to these battle-hardened men. Medics came in and told us that they would take care of everyone and for us not to give them anything to eat. My unit left in a few hours, and we continued on our advance. We were followed by a larger, better, well-equipped team to help. The Army Signal Corps had a few photographers taking photos. One of them promised me a few. He kept his promise and gave me 5 or 6 photos. When the Holocaust Museum in St. Louis was created, I gave these original pictures to the hell that we saw. This is where those photographs belong. The sights and the stench of Dachau have never left me. Thank you.
In honor of those liberators, I ask you to please rise for the words of the national anthem. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
We will now turn to the candle lighting portion of our commemoration. In honor of the 6 million Jewish victims of the Holocaust, we light 6 memorial candles. We light a 7th candle for the victims of other genocides around the world. Since our community's earliest Yom HaShoah commemoration, the first candle has always been lit by Sarah Wolf. Though Sarah and her beloved husband Leo have passed away, our Holocaust Museum is a fulfillment of their shared vision. Members of the Wolf family, will you please stand and light our first candle as you pass your family's legacy of remembrance on to the next generation. Thank you. The second candle will be lit by Gloria Kaplan-Feldman and her brother David Kaplan. They are joined by Gloria's daughter Cheryl Atkin and her children Sarah and Brian. Gloria and David's parents were able to survive and save the lives of Gloria and David. Their other children were murdered, along with most of their family. Their horrific and traumatic journey took them from their home in HaShoah, Lithuania. It was something they never talked about. They were liberated on May 8th of 1945. After a time in hospital and a DP camp, the family was sponsored by cousins in St. Louis and arrived in 1949. They built a happy life in St. Louis and are grateful to the St. Louis community. This candle is to honor the survivors and the memory of the victims. Gloria married Reuben of blessed memory in 1957. They had 2 children and now grandchildren and great-grandchildren. David also has 2 children and great-grandchildren. Kaplan, Feldman, and Atkin families, thank you so much for lighting this candle. The next candle will be lit by Sig Adler. Siegfried Adler was born on November 19th of 1935 in Germany to Adolf and Carola Adler. After experiencing years of oppression and anti-Semitism, Sig's father was imprisoned in Dachau. He was able to get released, and his family was able to escape Germany in 1940. The family settled in the United States, and Sig proudly became a United States citizen in 1945. He was bar mitzvahed in November of 1948, and he and his wife Carol married in October of 1960. His family has continued to blossom here and grow in St. Louis. Sig now volunteers his time at the museum, where he shares his story with students and is part of the ongoing legacy of Holocaust education. Thank you, Sig. The next candle will be lit by Oscar Jacob. Oscar was born in Romania in 1930. On May 4th of 1944, Oscar's family was taken by Hungarian and German Nazis. After 2 weeks, they were put on a train, about 180 people into a cattle car. They were transferred to Auschwitz-Birkenau. A few months later, they were transferred on to a labor detail and were forced to work as masons. In January of 1945, as the Russian army was approaching, the prisoners were transferred to a camp called Althammer, a satellite camp of Auschwitz. A few weeks afterwards, they were put again on trains, under horrible conditions, and after 5 days they arrived in Bergen-Belsen. On April 15th of 1945, Oscar Jacob was a prisoner at Bergen-Belsen when British tanks arrived and announced their liberation. Oscar, thank you for lighting this candle. Our next candle lighter is Rachel Miller. Rachel Miller survived the Holocaust as a hidden child in France. After the Germans entered Paris in 1940, Rachel was sent to live in the French countryside. Her immediate family stayed behind in Paris, including her beloved sister Sabine. Not a single member of Rachel's immediate family survived. In total, she lost 93 members of her family and was the only one to survive the Holocaust. She came to America as a teenager, where she later married and had 2 sons. Rachel, thank you for lighting this candle. Our next candle lighter is Felicia Wirtz. Felicia was born in Poland 2 years before the Second World War. Her town was bombed and her family fled to the eastern border of Poland, in Russia. They were sent to a hard labor camp in northern Russia, where her mother died of typhoid fever due to a lack of any medical help in the camp. Her life was saved by her Uncle Isaac, who was 17, her mother's brother. She and her younger brother became orphans, and their uncle made arrangements to send them to an orphanage. Felicia's brother was put up for adoption in central Russia during the war, and in 1946 came back to Poland with other orphans. She came to St. Louis in 1979, where she got a position as a social worker for Soviet Jews who were let go from persecution. She retired from her job in 2005 and joined the volunteer work in our Holocaust Museum in 2006. She believes it is very important, considering the rise of anti-Semitism in this country, to continue this work. Felicia, thank you so much for lighting this candle. Our next candle acknowledges genocides around the world. Elvadine Pasek, will you please come and light our next candle? Elvadine was born and raised in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Pasek came to the United States after the war with his sister in 1996 and settled in Vermont. As a U.S. citizen, he lives with his wife, Adina, and their 2 young children. As a survivor of genocide in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Elvadine was one of the first witnesses to testify in 2012 at the war crimes trial of the military commando Mladic by the International Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia. His testimony was used to show Mladic's forces committed extermination, forced deportation, numerous other crimes against humanity, mass murder, and including genocide on an organized basis. Mladic was the Serbian general who initiated the siege of Sarajevo and later led the forces that massacred 8,000 Bosnian men and boys after overrunning the United Nations safe area. He was indicted for war crimes in 1996 and was at large until 2011. Pasek told the court about a less famous incident, a mass murder in the village of Grabovica, where 162 men were brutally murdered, and it was the last time he saw his father, uncle, cousins, and friends. Their bodies were never recovered. Elvadine lights this candle this year in honor of the victims of this genocide, as we mark 30 years since the anniversary of the Bosnian Herzegovina genocide. Thank you very much, Elvadine. Our next candle is the Flame of Remembrance. Felice Joyce, will you please join me?
My name is Felice Joyce, and I am a member of the Survivors and Descendants group. I will be introducing the Flame of Remembrance candlelighters. In Judaism, the imagery of light is used as a symbol of the presence of the Creator of all life, the soul of a human being, and goodness itself. Today, as we light this flame of remembrance, we honor life and remember the people who were affected by the Holocaust, Nazi persecution, and other genocides. May their lights never be extinguished. Let us commit to fight all forms of hatred, bigotry, and violence, and join together to bring more light into this world. This year, the Flame of Remembrance will be lit by Lori Cooper Naylor, Adam Naylor, and Becca Naylor. Lori's grandparents and Becca's great-grandparents, Simon and Bobby Cohn, were Holocaust survivors who came to St. Louis in 1949. Many know them for the business Simon Cohn's Kosher Meat and Deli. When the Nazis invaded his Polish town, Simon was 14 and wanted to go to a work camp seeking adventure and independence away from home. He quickly found out that this was not the case. During his imprisonment, he built roads and manufactured airplane parts and passed through 10 different camps, including Auschwitz-Birkenau. Bobby was from Hungary and deported to Auschwitz with her parents and brother in 1944. A Nazi guard who was from her Hungarian town recognized her and chose her for a special selection with better conditions. There, she made bombs. Simon and Bobby had 3 children, 8 grandchildren, and Becca, beautiful Becca, is now their 6th great-grandchild. Lori, Adam, and Becca, please light the flame of remembrance.
Thank you to all of our candle lighters this year. Next, we welcome members of the Wolf family to come to the Bima and lead us in the Kaddish. For those that can, please say along and stand up.
Yiskadal v'yiskadash shemei rabbah, v'yamad v'ra kirutei, v'yamlich malchutei, v'yakon uv'yakon, uv'yachai debeit Yisrael ba'ala, v'yisman karib yemiru, amen. Yehei shemei rabbah nivrach, v'olam umay amen. Yisbarach v'yishtabach v'yisbarach v'yitchaman, Yisnaseh v'yitadar v'yaleh, v'yalal shemei b'kedusha v'yichu. V'olam min kol v'rachata, v'yisharata tishbachata v'nechamata, v'da'am v'yamam v'yimu, amen. Yehei shalama rabba min shamaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimu, amen. Oseh shalom v'mamav, Hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimu, amen.
Thank you. Please be seated. Each year, we lay a rose for the righteous among the nations and all those who fight against hate and anti-Semitism. This year, we honor all journalists who share with the world the horror of the Holocaust. Journalists like Edward R. Morrow, who said upon visiting Buchenwald in 1945, "I reported what I saw and heard, but only part of it. For most of it, I have no words." To journalists like Morrow and to St. Louis's own Joseph Pulitzer, we owe a debt of gratitude for sharing with us the horrors that words could not describe. This rose will be laid by Jordan Palmer, the Chief Digital Content Officer at the St. Louis Jewish Light. Though he has no known familial connection to the Holocaust, Jordan considers it to be a profound honor to lay a rose in memory of the journalists who bore witness. Participating in this commemoration and doing other activities like reading the names in years past has become his way of connecting to a shared responsibility to remember and never forget. Thank you, Jordan. As we reach the end of our program, I want to leave you with some final reflections on this year's theme: liberation, loss, and life. For survivors, liberation brought freedom, an end to the Holocaust and Nazi terror, but it could never erase the loss. the shattered families, the stolen futures, the unspeakable trauma. As we mark 80 years since the end of the Holocaust, we remember that while victory ended the war, it could not bring back the 6 million Jewish souls murdered during those dark years. Today, we honor the memory of the victims, but we also honor the survivors, the bearers of life. Through their courage to rebuild, to love again, and to create new generations, they taught us that even after devastation, renewal is possible. Their strength endures in their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, and it endures in all of us as we carry forward their stories and their legacies. May their lives be our call to action. Thank you all for joining us for this year's Yom HaShoah commemoration. We will close with a performance of Aliyah Lee by Gaia and Ziv and Rabbi Amy Feder. Following their performance, we will witness the recession of the Torahs, in which we will ask you to please stand again. And Roy Hendon will close our program with the blowing of the shofar. We hope that at the conclusion of our program, you will join us for a reception. This year's reception is generously sponsored by Gloria Kaplan-Feldman, and we are very grateful. We encourage you to take the time to join with us in community and share in the joy of each other. Thank you.